As of April 30th, it's been a full year since I started making regular content for YouTube. It's been a hell of a journey, and I wanted to take the chance to look back and see what I had done from then until now, and discuss things like why I made certain videos, how I made them, etc. I won't go over every single video because some of them simply don't really have much for me to add, such as videos discussing news, but there's quite a few things I can talk about with some manner of depth. I started off my YouTube career, and I use that word lightly, by making two related videos about Final Fantasy VII Remake, a review and a spoiler discussion video. I'm definitely not the first person to be motivated to begin a YouTube channel thanks to a Final Fantasy game, and I'm damn sure that I won't be the last. It seems like a new generation of content creators emerge every time a major Final Fantasy title is released, and obviously Remake was no exception. I had written video game reviews before, either for websites or just for my own entertainment, but this was the first time that I had decided to do a video review. While I was playing the game, I had no intention of making one. It wasn't until after I was long finished with it that I decided to go for it, simply because I was obsessing over it and wanted to release all of my thoughts onto something where anyone could hear me. I didn't care who, I just wanted someone to hear me talk about the game that I couldn't stop thinking about. Looking back on it now, I'm actually pretty shocked that the review isn't longer, but despite my fervent interest in the game at the time and the days I had to collect my thoughts, I still wasn't able to voice every comment, praise, criticism, or feeling about the game that I would eventually realize as the months passed. I made the spoiler discussion video separate, that much is true, and it is about 50% longer than the review, but it wasn't until later videos that I would be able to say what I wished I could have said here. The spoiler discussion video honestly didn't really say much that other similar videos have said, but again, I just kept obsessing over the game and I just needed an outlet to unleash all my feelings on it, because I'm pretty sure my friends were getting tired of me. Also, since I wasn't considering making a review while I was playing through the game the first time, I didn't really bother to save gameplay footage as I played normally. Remembering to save game footage while playing through a game for the first time was something I didn't bother to do until later. The next major video I did is about Final Fantasy VIII's junction system. After I completed Remake, my passion for Final Fantasy games was reignited, and I immediately went to the PlayStation Store to buy the original Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, and Final Fantasy IX, which I never actually got to finish when I first played it years ago due to a scratched up second disc. And believe it or not, 8 was the first Final Fantasy I ever played. I was a kid at the time, and while 7 was readily available, I figured I should ask my parents for the newer game since, it's newer. Little did I know that I was about to get slammed by the most complicated gameplay in all of Final Fantasy at the time for my first experience with the series. It ended up being the only game I ever bought a strategy guide for as well. Still, I ended up liking the game a lot, even though I knew in my childish mind that it was kinda flawed, but I couldn't really explain why, because I was just a kid. It has a special place in my heart, being my first Final Fantasy, and I understand why it has such a divisive reputation. However, as years went by and I occasionally went back to it, I grew to appreciate the junction system that the community was so split on. And since I was now making YouTube videos and replaying it yet again, I figured I would take the chance to explain how junctioning works, how it's manipulated, and its strengths and weaknesses. I like the concept of the system a lot, but it definitely needs work. My next couple of noteworthy videos are prediction videos, and so far the only ones I've done, because they're both about games really important to me. First was the prediction video for the Demon's Souls remake, which was something I always wished for. If there was ever a PS3 game that deserved a remake treatment, it was this one. Unfortunately, none of my bigger wishes in that video were realized. Bluepoint didn't give us the 6th Archstone, understandably. They didn't make the Dragon God fight any better, nor did they change the red and blue dragons into actual boss fights. The upgrade system wasn't simplified, but materials were a little easier to get, etc., etc. I still liked the game a hell of a lot because, well, it's Demon's Souls. The other prediction video is for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, so yeah, more remake-related content. I was not joking when I said I was thinking about the game a lot, and potential ending points for Part 2 were a particularly hot topic for me. because no one knows how many parts the saga is going to be. Many people assume 3, some believe 4, and pessimists who think Square will purposefully milk it for as long as possible believe it'll be more. Honestly, the more and more I think about it, the more I lean towards the remake saga being a total of 4 parts, because I assume that expansions to the story and setting will make previously optional things mandatory now. For example, I think visiting Wutai will be unavoidable this time around, and as such, it'll probably have a lot of things to do, including lots of character development for Yuffie, who I am currently looking forward to this coming June with Intergrade. I actually don't mind the saga being 4 parts, so long as they're not terribly far apart, and I don't think they will be. With every part that's made, there's slightly less new work to do for the next ones due to reusable assets and animations. But, unlike the Demon's Souls prediction video, this one will take another year or so at least before it's proven right or wrong. After those, I did a review of Ghost of Tsushima, a game I really enjoyed and respect a lot, even right now. Not much to add to it, but unfortunately I forgot yet again to save gameplay footage as I was playing, so most of what you see in the review is stuff I recorded after my initial playthrough. Not all, but most. I didn't think to save footage as I was playing until even after this. I wasn't yet used to the video reviewing process, so I didn't think to minimize avoidable work and trim unnecessary fat. Next up is my first real attempt at a video essay, The Fall and Return of G4. It's not a super complex or deep video, honestly. I didn't really convey any information that's not already very easy to look up on one's spare time, but as an old fan of the late Tech TV and early G4 eras, I had a lot of feelings about how the network slowly faded into irrelevancy and died. I was always super frustrated remembering how laughably mismanaged it was, and how its personality and everything that initially drew me to it was just getting stripped away piece by piece. I do have some fairly high hopes for the upcoming return, especially since Vice President of Content Partnerships and Brand Development, Blair Herter, is aware of my complaints. Quite literally. He retweeted this video, and it was the first time a video of mine was shared by someone more popular than me. Someone with at least some influence. And that felt amazing. I didn't think I'd be able to get someone like that to do that for me so soon after starting my channel, and it helped a lot. It was the first video to hit 1,000 views naturally, and 100 likes. The next video is something meant to be more informative. Why fighting games need rollback, crossplay, and Wi-Fi indicators. This video took even more time to put together than the G4 one because it was actually way more research heavy. I needed to do my best to create the most convincing argument for all 3 parts, and it required going back to explain how they all work, pull out successful examples, and other stuff. These are fairly important topics within the FGC, and I've always thought the slow implementation of rollback netcode was just laughable. The refusal of Japanese fighting game developers to adapt and improve their multiplayer experiences is a crippled limb that stagnated the longevity of certain games and the growth of the genre. Making the G4 video and this one back to back was, at this point, the biggest challenge of my YouTube career. It was tough, and I needed a bit of a break, which explains the next few videos, which were short, simple, and easy to make. The video about Final Fantasy XIV's 5.3 update was still pretty important to me though, because I love that game, especially Shadowbringers. It was a big deal for me to finally see the ending of that story. The video about Sony and Microsoft's game of Price Chicken was just a last-minute video I decided to do just to not have a huge gap between videos. It's honestly filler. And funnily enough, part of it was rendered outdated within hours because I said in the video that Microsoft hadn't announced the Xbox Series S yet because they were probably afraid to do so before giving the price of the Series X. But within the runtime of Zack Snyder's Justice League, they announced the Series S and I looked dumb. Thankfully, no one watched that video. Then I did a review of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, one of the best remakes in a year loaded with remakes. It effortlessly revitalized interest in the series, and since then, Vicarious Vision's reward for accomplishing that was being absorbed by the Blizzard amoeba. I'm still not very happy about that, and now no one's sure if the other old Tony Hawk games are going to get the same love and care. We'll have to wait and see. Unfortunately, again, I think most of the footage used in this video was entirely done after I finished the game. I still hadn't fully gotten to the content creator mindset yet. I don't know why it was taking me so long to acclimate myself to it. Next is arguably the most important video I've made so far. Why video games need piracy, the industry's preservation problem. To some people, it's a pretty spicy opinion to have, but I'm strongly of the belief that if you have the money and willingness to spend that money on a game that publishers and platform holders do not want to let you buy, then you're completely within your moral right to just pirate it, even if you're not necessarily within your legal one. There's an argument to be made that you're not obligated to that game, sure, but if the publisher or platform holder doesn't give you the opportunity to make a legal purchase to begin with, in spite of your willingness to pay, then they're not obligated to your money either. Anyway, this is a video that I'm proud of and a topic I take very seriously. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring up the point of DRM rendering certain games unplayable after a certain amount of time. It's rare, but it happens. Maybe in the future I'll do a sort of sequel to this video and include that. I also noticed that the views for this went up a bit during the backlash against Sony for announcing the unceremonious removing of the PS3, PSP, and Vita online stores, which they've thankfully walked back on. Just goes to show that people don't like access to things being taken away arbitrarily, and they will resort to extra-legal activities to get what they want if it's the only way to do so. And then there's my first ever analysis video. There's a small difference, in my mind at least, between my analysis videos and my other game discussion videos. My analyses focus more on a specific concept or idea and how the games relate to, approach, or implement it, and they tend to be a bit more argumentative and seek to prove a point. In this one, it's Devil May Cry's reputation in the eyes of reluctant players and the perception of combat depth. This is a subject that's pretty hard to broach without seeming like a pompous dickhead who thinks he's godlike at video games, but I wanted to try anyway. Because I'm a big DMC fan, and I'm sick and tired of seeing this series being painfully misrepresented by people who know nothing about it and barely put any effort into playing the way the game wishes people would play. I'm not one of those pretentious DMC fans who thinks you need to beat the game on Dante Must Die with all S ranks to prove your love for the series, but I do think you should put more effort than the absolute bare minimum before criticizing a franchise known for its combat depth, in a genre of action that it created no less. Following that video was my impressions of the version 1.1 update for Ghost of Tsushima, which was an amazing update filled with awesome new content, including the game's multiplayer mode, Legends. It's seriously one of the best free updates to a single-player game I've ever seen, and it made a great game even greater. Not much else to say on that front. Next is my video about stupidly huge video game file sizes, one of the largest pains in the ass of this past generation. I've always been annoyed by games with unreasonably huge file sizes, and the issue has only been exacerbated by certain AAA first-person shooters that lack the content to justify how much space they take up in my storage. It's really bothersome when a 6-hour game hogs over 50 gigabytes of real estate, especially when a whole goddamn MMORPG with 3 expansions takes up less. I understand the reason why some games are unspeakably massive. Super high quality visual and audio assets, with the former likely being duplicated all over the game files dozens, maybe even hundreds of times to grant faster loading speeds. I get that. But when a game takes up 3 times as much space as another game that offers more content by orders of magnitude, it just looks incompetent. At worst, it feels like the developers have no respect for the player's limited storage space. It's not a huge deal if we're talking about hard disk drives, but we're entering the world of hyperfast SSDs, which are not cheap. This has always been an issue for me, and I could rant about it for a while, but I'll leave it here for now. Hopefully these AAA developers do something to at least make it seem like they respect our storage, because right now it sometimes feels like they're inflating their games on purpose. Next up is a trilogy of reviews, all of which are games I love. Yakuza Like a Dragon is absolutely fantastic and made it into my top 5 games of 2020. It's a stellar game, not just within the series, but in general. Honestly, I'd say it surpassed Yakuza 0 as my favorite. If I'm being blunt, I think the combat in Like a Dragon is just straight up an improvement over the combat of most other Yakuza games. That statement might irritate people who dislike turn-based combat, but that's how I feel. This is also the first review where I was finally mindful to save gameplay footage while playing through the game for the first time. It saved me from extra work in the editing process. And then there's the Demon's Souls remake, which is a beautiful game and faithful recreation of a modern classic, though perhaps a bit too faithful in some respects. I still would have really liked for the upgrade system to be simplified and for respeccing to be added, but it is ultimately still the Demon's Souls we know and love, but with much better graphics and performance. Seriously, this game is gorgeous to look at and the 3D audio is mesmerizing. The third review is for Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, which took my Game of the Year for 2019 and made it even better, so I don't have any real complaints about it. I just wished there was a bit more. DMC4 Special Edition gave us playable Lady and Trish, so I would have liked them here too, especially since Capcom went out of their way to give them changeable costumes in spite of them being non-playable. But as long as Virgil's here, I'm satisfied. After those reviews was a short filler video on my thoughts on some of the premieres at the Game Awards, but following that was my most popular video to date, and for a pretty good reason. It concerned a hell of a hot topic at the time, my Cyberpunk 2077 review. The game came out and the controversy floodgates just dropped open. Graphical issues, frame rate problems, obnoxious bugs, crashes to home screen, damn near any annoying problem you can think of, this game had it on the console versions. And even if you did play on PC, the game still suffered from the egregious lies about the content that CDPR promised prospective players. Mediocre to borderline non-existent role-playing, terrible driving controls, predictable AI, meaningless life paths, lackluster romance options, and just more wasted potential and missed opportunities than I care to list all over again. After the years of hype, Cyberpunk 2077 ended up being one of the biggest blunders of the last decade, and regardless of the fact the game might have sold 13 million copies, which, oddly enough, is still considered a disappointing figure by CDPR's higher-ups, the developer has suffered a major crippling blow to their once great reputation. Because of this major turbo botch of a game, my highly critical review gained a lot of traction, likely picked up by YouTube's algorithm, and it just exploded from there. I gained a lot of new subscribers, some of whom may be watching this video too, and the video now holds basically every personal channel record conceivable so far. Most views, most likes, most dislikes, most comments, and most subs gained. I'll admit that while I am proud of the final product, I do wish some of this video's success was shared with some of my other videos, which I'll get to in a bit. After that was my 2020 The Year of Video Game Remakes video, which held the mildly divisive opinion that remakes are not wastes of resources, they don't take talent away from new games, and remakes should take the opportunity to make changes. I've never really been a fan of the rhetoric that remakes are inherently less creative or desired than new things. I always felt that was nonsense. New IPs aren't always really new. Sometimes they're derivative as all hell and wear their inspirations on their sleeve in the most obvious, annoyingly transparent way imaginable. And sometimes remakes change a game so much they're borderline unrecognizable from a gameplay perspective in comparison to the original. It's not a totally black and white discussion. Sometimes remakes have more creativity in them than new stuff. That being said, 2020 had a lot of remakes, and the ones I used in the video were meant to cover the spectrum of how remakes approach being a remake. In the case of Demon's Souls, it's a game that probably didn't grasp the opportunity to change enough. In the case of Resident Evil 3, it probably changed too much. In the case of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it managed to find the middle point between both extremes, changing a lot in some points and barely changing at all in others. I enjoy seeing remakes of classics. I always welcome the chance to see them succeed in a new era, where the standards are different from the time in which they first came out. After that is my video on whether Demon's Souls is the hardest or easiest Souls game, a conversation I've seen come up again ever since the launch of the remake. It's a pretty complex discussion because what makes Souls games hard isn't one specific thing or the other. Typically, people think of bosses first and foremost when asked to recall the difficulty of a Souls game. But the thing about Demon's Souls is that its bosses are easy, but its level design and enemy placements that can be absolutely brutal, and I simply wanted to stress that. Then there's the video that I actually consider to be my best so far. What is survival horror? It's my longest video and the one I've put the most time and effort into. I don't consider myself any type of authority on the genre, but I had some fairly strong views on the discussion of what makes a horror game survival horror, specifically. I won't go into detail here because, well, it's a lot, but I think I've made a fair examination of it. I also go over the history of survival horror, going so far as to emulate a goddamn NEC PC 6001 to record 3 minutes of footage of a 40-year-old game. So yeah, I put a decent amount of work into this video, more so than any video in the past. In fact, I'd say I put more hours into it than my Piracy video and rollback and crossplay for fighting games video put together. Sadly, all that effort has come together to return less than 10% of the views my Cyberpunk review has, but that's how things go sometimes, I guess. I'm still proud of the video, but I won't pretend I'm not disappointed in the view count. I'm just being real with you here. Next is another trio of reviews and impressions. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox, a very fun action RPG with great combat and a good jumping off point for anyone who hasn't played an Ys game before. Then 13 Sentinels, which isn't just a good science fiction video game, but just good science fiction period. I can't and won't go into detail, but the story is phenomenal, dense, and tightly written. And the combat is very fun and strategical. I highly recommend it. And then there's the impressions video for the first Guilty Gear Strive beta, which was very fun, and the rollback was simply flawless. I didn't expect it to be so damn good. The lobbies were unfortunately terrible and a huge chore to deal with at the time, and if they were any worse, they would have almost undone the benefits of rollback. Almost. Then there's my top 5 games of 2020. Not much to say about it other than the top 3 were very difficult to put in the order I ultimately decided on. At one point, each of them took the top spot for some period of time before I racked my brain and finalized everything. If there's anything to take away from my list, it's that the top 3 are all very close together to the point where they are almost interchangeable. Then I put out another fighting game related video, this time about price. Fighting games have a lot of barriers preventing them from being as popular in the competitive scene as they probably should be, considering how long the genre has been around. And price is one of them. A lot of fighting game publishers completely ignore the idea of releasing an updated bundle including past season content to lighten the load on price for their 2, 3, or 4-year-old game. And this issue is worsened when a season pass doesn't have the content that justifies the price. There's the argument to be made that you can just wait for a sale, yes, and sometimes they're on sale somewhat frequently, but frankly, you shouldn't have to wait for the sale at all. There should be just an updated bundle available at a discounted price all the time, period. After that, I reviewed Godzilla vs. Kong, my first ever movie review, and due to me also giving my thoughts on the previous 2 legendary Godzilla movies, the video ended up longer than most of my game reviews. But I just wanted to be thorough and let people know where I'm coming from. I liked the movie a lot, but I don't know how often I'll bother doing movie reviews. I will occasionally talk about non-gaming related things, obviously, because this is my channel and I can ultimately talk about whatever I want, but I want to keep those occasions strictly to things I care about and have a fair amount to discuss. Next is my second analysis video, which is now about Dark Souls 2 and how it creates build variety. It's a game with a very bittersweet reputation among the Souls fanbase, but I personally love the game. And quite frankly, I think a lot of criticisms thrown at it are just straight up unfair. I might go into detail in a future video, but in this one specifically, I praise the game a lot for its strength and replayability. There's so much that the game does to make every playthrough feel different, and I think that gets lost in the sheer amount of vitriol the game receives. Every other Souls game can make you too paranoid to improvise and too scared to deviate from a specific plan regarding character development, or they might try to nudge you towards a specific playstyle you probably don't want to do. I think Dark Souls 2 is the most effective at avoiding those things, and I wanted to give it the credit it deserves on that front. And finally, the last video before the full 365 days are up was about some of my favorite artists in the video game industry. It's a brief video where I just heap praise onto the likes of Yoshitaka Amano, Yoji Shinkawa, Ayami Kojima, and Noriyoshi Orai. Nothing much else beyond that. And that pretty much covers my entire first year on YouTube. Since it was year one, it took some time to really find my groove and get comfortable, and develop certain habits, and there's always room for improvement. Gaining subscribers is pretty slow going when you're starting from zero and don't have any real means of boosting yourself. It's either pay out the ass for Google Ads or hope a video goes viral somehow, and I don't really have the money for the former and don't even know how to go about causing the latter. So I basically have to cross my fingers and hope a video catches on when I release it. So far, it's only happened once, really, and out of 39 videos in my first year, only 3 have passed 1,000 views. I will say though, the comments of support and encouragement are greatly appreciated. I'm always very happy to see people express their enjoyment of the videos I make. Growing from nothing on this platform is extremely difficult, and the thought of stopping crosses my mind constantly, because it does hurt seeing videos you put a lot of work into receive a pittance of views in return. But I keep doing it because I enjoy the creative process, and I enjoy having a way to put my thoughts out there in the off chance someone hears them and is intrigued by them. It's kind of a Sisyphean task, but progress does occur. It's very slight and very gradual, but it's there. This concludes my look back on my first year of making videos. Here's hoping to an even more prosperous second year. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.